when a murder is discovered.
It was a female who had her head and her hands removed. And she had been found in what can be described as like a duffel bag. And she had her wrist and her ankles bound.
It doesn't just destroy one life.
I don't think he's capable of loving people, because how do you kill your own children? That was the last thing those children saw, was their dad killing them. How do you do that?
It tears communities apart.
When her body was located, she was nude, she was deceased, she had some ligature marks on her neck.
It's up to the police to not only solve the mystery.
I then went round the house looking for anything that might obviously be stolen.
And track down the killer, but bring them to justice.
There's 2 bodies found. Your first thought is, oh my goodness me, is there a serial killer?
In this episode, the body of a young woman is found in a ditch. But who is she?
So it was very shocking. It felt like there was something in the air, for sure. We didn't know where she was from. You know, somebody must be missing her.
Meet the detectives.
Julie had been drugged with ground down amitriptyline, an antidepressant. She had slowly lapsed into a coma.
Who reveal how they caught the killer.
He was a violent man and he was abusive to women, and he was a loose cannon.
On the 6th of July 1994, the body of a young woman was found in Lincolnshire.
A body in the ditch at Colby. He had been found by a dog walker. 9 a.m. that Wednesday morning. She'd phoned it in a few minutes later, realised the gravity of what it was, realised that we needed to be moved quickly on this.
Local Detective Inspector Neil Jones was on holiday at a caravan site in Yorkshire at the time.
I was sat having a meal with my wife and 2 children, and we saw this police car moving up and down the site. And I thought, I just had this little feeling, you just have a little feeling that might be looking for me. It was obviously East Yorkshire, a police officer who came and tapped on the door and said, we're trying to locate you. There has been a murder down in Lincolnshire.
Detective Chief Inspector Nick Howard raced to the scene.
First thing is to get down there, assess it and cordon it off. So I went with the DC and the DI and straight away you look what's around. There's a pub up the road, there are a few houses. So straight away you can start house to house. Where this was situated, it was quite a clever deposition site. It was 300 metres from any habitable building. That road, you would never use it. Unless you were a farmer, you would never use it. So it was clever. The way it was done was clever and designed, I think, to minimise the chances of being seen.
Detective Inspector Neil Jones was appointed team leader on the case.
Arriving at the scene, I've been told that the body of a young lady has been found in this ditch down by the side here. Lincoln is just up the road. This is the small village of Colby. There's not a lot of traffic. I'm here purely to have a look to see the situation of where the deceased was found.
When a body is found in a ditch at the side of a road, the problems that we face are largely concerned with decomposition of that body. So the environment that it's found in can have a significant effect on how quickly or how slowly those remains decompose.
The area from Broughton, that end, up to the village is blocked off, so there's no movement along this road at all. Nobody can come down here who isn't associated with the crime. So you've got a number of vehicles, as I say, scenes of crime officers arriving, scenes of crime equipment. You've got forensic scientists, pathologists, all the technical experts that are going to try and give us a clue to anything that may be on the scene. The other important thing is we don't want to lose evidence. And out here, as you can see, with the elements, we've got to deal with this before there's some change of weather. It's very isolated. We're going to do a fingertip search. They talk about this golden hour. That first hour is when things are really being pulled together. It's slightly different here because it's out in the middle of nowhere. So nobody's come through in the last hour. We're talking about the last few days. So we're going to be leaning on people. Where were you? What were you doing? What did you see? And that's the most important thing. What did you see? And come forward and tell us what you did see.
The presence of so many police in a rural location soon attracted the media.
The call would have come into the newsroom. We used to call a thing called the voice bank, and their inspectors from police officers around the county would put on there any crimes overnight. And this day it was that a body had been found in a ditch in Colby, which is a village just outside of Lincoln, and police were appealing for witnesses.
On that particular morning, I walked down here. I actually just saw a tractor driver, and his instinct, what have you seen? So you just stop him, and immediately he was able to say, well, I saw a red van with yellow writing on the side.
The team had their first potential witness, but they still had no idea who the victim was.
There's no clear cause of death, that the body was naked, there were 2 rings on the left hand, the duvet had covered the body. Let the pathologist have a look, take a view of what could be done there, what must be done there, as opposed to what could be done at the mortuary. We weren't clear. There were no stab marks, there were no strangulation marks.
Most important things you need to do with a murder inquiry is identify the victim. Once the identification is complete, obviously that gives you a bit of a clue about what's happened in most cases. In this case, obviously, we didn't know what had happened and where. We knew she'd been badly beaten and she'd died, but we didn't know where that offence had taken place, who was responsible.
In any situation where a body is found, we're looking for information that pertains to the identity of that individual, the cause of death, and if anybody else might have been involved. In terms of the body specifically, we might be looking for DNA, we might be looking for fingerprints, we could look at dental records, dentition. We might also look at determining the biological profile of that individual, so whether they were male or female, how old they were when they died, how tall they might have been, and what ancestry they might have had as well.
Despite forensic analysis, the team still had no clue to the victim's identity or how she ended up in the ditch in Colby.
Spent probably 2 days putting dental charts into envelopes for the 17,500 dentists up and down the country, of which I think we got 4 replies at the end of the day. Obviously, the murderer, if you like, he's making his escape. He's not running away, but he's covering his tracks.
The post-mortem revealed that the woman had been badly beaten and had consumed a cocktail of different drugs, including a painkiller called amitriptyline, that had caused her to pass out.
The cause of death ultimately was proven to be aspiration pneumonia, drugged with ground down amitriptyline, an antidepressant. She had slowly lapsed into a coma, lost the cough reflex ability as she did so, and drowned on her own vomit. But that wasn't apparent at the time. So our thoughts were, we were confident it was murder.
There were enough drugs to kill an elephant. The violence that was used on her body, he bit her, he beat her. That is not the actions of a man that's made a mistake and panics. They are the actions of a sexual sadistic perpetrator.
Detectives took the usual steps to help identify the young woman.
We had an artist draw a sketch and impression. That was put into the papers. It didn't yield a result. So we needed something else.
Unhappy with the sketch, Detective Neil Jones then came up with a novel idea to get a better picture of the victim.
One of the senior detectives had heard of Vogue magazine picture enhancement for models, so he went down to London with the mortuary photographs.
The art room secretary took a call from DCI Jones and basically said, I've got a policeman on the line, he wants to talk to you. He'd basically explained on the phone that he'd got these photographs. They didn't know who the girl was, and they really were stuck as to how do we find out who she is. Well, of course, he realised that the only way to do that would be to show her photograph, and the only photographs obviously they had were a scene of crime. They really wanted to try and get a picture of what she would have looked like in life. He was literally in the art department within a couple of hours of that phone call.
Forensically, for me, the most striking thing about this case was the unusual route that the investigators took. The fact that they took the initiative and went to the fashion industry to get information about facial depiction and how that could be better used was absolutely fascinating.
The first seeing the real pictures was probably the worst, and then then you realise, well, you've just got a job to do, and let's do this one and let's do that one. You put your emotional response away at that point. I think that the body was found quite a while after she'd been left, and because if you're lying face down, gravity changes things, and the skin becomes very red and blotchy and physically changes. So we had to sort of ignore all that in a way and try and, certainly on the computer, to sort of smooth it out, and with the drawings to sort of ignore that side of it.
At the time, it was ecstatic that they could actually do this sort of thing. What really was surprising, the amount of time that it took. This is not a 5-minute job. I mean, we got there at 8, 9 o'clock in the morning or 10 o'clock, and it was mid-afternoon before we even get to sort of this stage. And then it's another 2 hours before because every single little pixel on that chart has to be removed, replaced, and one of the right colour, and all the rest of it.
In some of the imagery, we managed to open the eye a bit, because of course when your eyes are closed, you look different to when they're open. So, again, that helped, and I think some of the pictures that were published her eyes were open slightly, which again helped to bring life back into the imagery.
The minute we got that picture, we thought, yes, this has got to be it. This has surely got to help and be the answer to this investigation with regard to identification.
With the help of Vogue magazine, a clearer image of the victim was created. Would the team finally be able to identify the body?
And this was the final image. Her features are obviously hers, because it's straight off her photograph.
And we got them into the press, and we got the breakthrough we needed on the 28th of July.
DCI Nick Howard received a phone call from a member of a local religious group, claiming to know the victim.
He was the head of the Toaster commune. He was known in the group as John the Preceptor, at the head of the group. As is always the case for these things, you're wondering, is it a genuine call? Is it mistaken? But he was unequivocal and quite calm. He said, "I've known her for 7 years. That's Julie Clayton."
In Lincolnshire, detectives had identified the body in the ditch as Julie Clayton. But to help piece together what had happened to her, they needed to know more.
The first breakthrough with the Julie Clayton murder inquiry was obviously the identification. We'd covered the scene. As you can see, there isn't going to be too much to do here. We're doing the villagers, we're finding witnesses, but the most important thing was, where was this young lady from? Who was she? So we could try and link her with the offender.
It turned out Julie was a 27-year-old Australian. She had been living in the UK for several years.
Julie was an adventurer. As a 20-year-old, she decided to go backpacking and to see Europe. She travelled into Europe and she worked her way to the UK. She found people, like-minded people at the Jesus Fellowship in Toaster. people that she liked, they liked her, so she settled there. She stayed there for several years. She was happy there, but then the time came, she wanted to return home to see her family. She was homesick. But she decided that she'd use the rest of that summer to see the part she hadn't seen, the west of England, southwest of England.
She was a young girl who was enjoying life, travelling around. I mean, today, lots of young people travel around all of the time. It's nothing new then. I think it was quite unusual for a young girl so far from home to travel around in another country. She must have been a really nice, open personality. People took to her, and she obviously, probably was a downfall. She was clearly very trusting, wasn't she?
It's so sad when you look at Julie's lifestyle. She was over in the UK travelling. She'd been here for 7 years. We know that she'd been part of a commune, a religious commune, which I think suggests that she was quite naive. She was obviously searching for something.
It was people she met along the way at fairs. At the Strawberry Fair in Cambridge, after she'd left the commune, she met some vegans and she travelled with them down to the southwest, or agreed to meet them down there in Snostal. And then she survived by getting fruit picking jobs. And then her plan was to get back to Australia.
Hoping to learn more, DCI Nick Howard made the journey from Lincolnshire to St Austell in Cornwall and made an appeal to the local community about both Julie and the red van that had been seen near the body.
Once she had been identified, and then obviously we'd moved to Austell to try and locate her and locate the offender. This is the circulation that was put out for the red van. We didn't know the number of it. We know it's a Series 1 Mercedes Sprinter van, but no more than that.
We had a witness who actually saw Julie being picked up at around 9:30 on Friday the 1st of July. We had another sighting of her with a male, similarly described, about an hour later at a pasty shop in Lostwithiel. So that would take the time forward to around 10:30, 11 o'clock. Then they've come back, and the sighting by the witness of the bedsit was midday. So at midday, the witness sees Julie with this large guy and the maroon Mercedes van loading her stuff in.
The team now had sightings of Julie, the red van, and an unidentified man in Cornwall. They began to track their journey to Lincolnshire.
A red van had been sighted outside her flat. So what I did is had this on the walls, charts, if you like, of a timeline of what was happening with the inquiry, where Julie was, what was being found. So the officers had come in, they could see immediately where we were, which was the next step, and I'd also got some arrows of where we're going next.
So we think then they've made their way to Southampton, probably down the A303. We don't know, but we think that he's fed the amitriptyline to Julie in a spicy meal, probably on the Saturday evening at some point. The drug starts to take effect. She starts to lapse into a coma. Then sometime during that Saturday night into Sunday morning, probably at Southampton, waiting for the boat jumble to start the next day, he's assaulted her. Not being able to do what he'd planned to do, he leaves her in the van while he does his business at the jumble, selling batteries, buying stuff for yachts. Then Julie's undiscovered. They make their way north on Sunday the 3rd of July, and that's when he deposits Julie's body in the ditch at Colby after dark, around 10 p.m. we think, when it would have been dark.
Neil and the team needed to find the owner of that red van urgently. He again reached out to the local community for any information.
I got a call from a lady, and I think her name was Tamsin, and she was at Falmouth. I went to see her, and she said that she'd answered an advert in one of the boat magazines to act as crew. And she'd agreed to go to France with this chap and crew his boat.
She had answered an advert he put in Yachting Monthly for young females 16 to 24, long days, fun nights, ocean-going yacht. She answered that. He recruited her. He met her at Portsmouth a few days later, took her over to Le Havre on a ferry, went to Honfleur.
The man who had placed the ad in Yachting Monthly took Tamsin to the boat in his red van. But what happened next really made the team take notice.
After a couple of days, they set off in the yacht, sailed into the mouth of the Seine, and it was one morning she was feeling drowsy. We think he'd already drugged her, and she fought him off. He tried to attack her while she was in a sleeping bag. She escaped, she was a slip of a girl. She got through a hatch cover, dived overboard. It's quite wide at that point, the River Seine, apparently. She swam ashore, raised the alarm at a local farmhouse. They called the gendarmerie. They went to speak to him. He was a fluent French speaker. The gist of it was, it's a mistake. She's misunderstood my intentions. She's overreacted. They let him go.
This witness didn't know the name of her attacker, but detectives were already intensifying their search for the owner of the red van when they struck upon the idea of tracing the vehicle through the MOT test database from across the UK.
Based on the hypothesis, the person we were looking for either lived in the north and travelled regularly to the south, southwest, or vice versa, we thought it was a good line of inquiry. We started with Devon and Cornwall because we knew he'd been there, he'd been seen picking her up. And so we went to Exeter, which was one of the hubs, put in Mercedes vans in the last 12 months and worked back. And we eventually got to April in Barnstaple, and a Mercedes van of a similar description, owned by a person with a conviction for female abduction of a hitchhiker, immediately got our attention.
That information was sent up to the ops room at Lincoln Police Headquarters, and during the evening one of the officers would then do a PNC check to try and locate where that vehicle was. And the Mercedes van was identified to Denzel Walker.
Detectives had a name, known sex offender Denzel Walker. His description matched that given by Julie Clayton's friend when she got into the red van in Cornwall back in July.
He looked threatening. He stood about 30, 40 metres away from Julie. He didn't come close so people get a good look at him. He had a ponytail. He was a big guy, physically imposing. He didn't like the look of him. He told her, don't go with him. But she said, no, I'm going to go with him. He's got an ocean-going yacht. I'm going to crew it to Malta and I'll go on from there. So by then, he'd convinced her.
So she's desperate, she's got no money, and then suddenly somebody comes along and offers a way back to Australia. And I can understand how that would have been intoxicating for Julie.
Denzel Walker, he was well known in the sailing community down in Devon and Cornwall. He lived in a derelict boat on Portsmouth Harbour. And it was a wreck. It just looked like an old sailing boat that, a galleon sort of thing. It was a real wreck. And he'd lived in there on the harbour for some time.
Now police had identified their suspect, the race was on to find and track him down.
There was a realisation in the team that we were getting close, but we had to be careful and thorough. And this breakthrough, you thought to yourself, yes, we're very close now.
In August 1994, a month after Julie Clayton was found drugged and murdered, detectives were keen to speak with their only lead, Denzel Walker. He had been tracked down to his mother's home in Hull, in the northeast of England.
It wasn't definitive, but it was the best lead we had, so we went with it. Went up to Hull covertly, found the van, got control of it outside the home address, and very quickly got a team up there with the intention of taking him to a police station. They'd arrived at the house while Walker was out, so the mother greeted them, allowed them to come in and to wait for a son. They told her they needed to question him about a case. They were dealing with a serious case, and they had to wait for about 20 minutes. He came back and he walked in. He had some flowers with him, and he bought these, we discovered, from a petrol station nearby to give to his mum. He was going away. We think he was fleeing because he'd been following the media, and I think he knew the net was closing on him.
I was down in Cornwall when Denzel Walker was actually found. I had identified his vehicle, and within a couple of days he'd obviously been arrested and brought into police station, and property belonging to Julie had been found on him, in his vehicle. We'd got a lot of work still to do.
We know that when Walker was arrested, the police found some items of Julie's. There could be many reasons for this. It could be that he just failed to get rid of them. It could be that he was wanting to sell them. Or it could have a more significant psychological reason. It could be that he was keeping a token from Julie, and that gave him some kind of sexual satisfaction.
Nearly 2 months after the body of Julie Clayton had been found, police finally had the man they suspected to be her killer in custody.
2 detective constables conducted the interview, and it was structured. Let them tell their story, and then start to put the challenges in based on what you have to challenge, undermine, disprove, to cast doubt upon, dispel.
As Walker faced questioning, he made a bold claim that he said proved he was not the killer.
At the time of his abduction and murder of Julianne Clayton, he would have been about 17, 18 stone, we calculated from the description, 6'2", physically imposing with long hair, unkempt, dishevelled appearance. By the time we found him on the 25th of August, he'd completely transformed himself. He was a registered diabetic for which he took insulin. We sought expert medical advice and opinion, and we realised that he'd, through a combination of diet and drugs manipulation, he'd managed to induce a weight loss of probably 2 stones in a short space of time. So by the time we found him, he didn't fit the physical description that the witness had given to us, and he'd cut his hair, and he was well groomed, and he used it with his solicitor, through his solicitor, to say, "You've clearly got the wrong person."
It's really interesting that Walker was a diabetic, and whilst the police were trying to identify Julie, which took a long time, he changed his insulin to change his appearance. So he lost a lot of weight and changed his facial hair. This was his plan, so he didn't get identified.
Despite his denials, the evidence against Denzel Walker was building nicely.
He would stick with something until it was clearly not believable. Throughout his initial interview, he maintained the narrative that he'd picked Julie up. He maintained the narrative that he gave her a lift, no more than that. He maintained the narrative that he dropped her off and left her and arranged to meet her again at Southampton, but she didn't turn up, so he sailed without her.
When the forensic tests from Walker's van and Julie's body arrived, the case began to look clear-cut.
So actually, with the vehicle, the van, both inside and outside, investigators would be looking for trace evidence again. So any evidence of blood splatter, blood evidence, any DNA evidence, fingerprint evidence, and certainly trace fibre evidence. So anything that might connect the van to a perpetrator or connect the van to the scene and to the victim.
It was clear that Julie had ingested amitriptyline, drugs that were found in Walker's possession in granular form, both in the van at the time and latterly when we traced the stolen yacht from Southampton. We conducted a thorough search under the water, over the water, and we recovered more drugs, amitriptyline ground powder on the yacht.
This crime was planned in some ways, in that he had the cocktail of drugs. He planned to sexually assault her. But it was also opportunistic because he just happened to come across Julie. So it's got elements of planning and opportunity. And a man like Walker, a sexual predator, he will always be looking for his next victim.
As well as the drugs, injuries found on Julie's body during post-mortem also connected her to Walker.
What was really important from a forensic point of view as well was the forensic odontological input, that dental information that came from the bite marks on Julie's body, because the investigators were able to match the bite marks with the impression taken of the perpetrator's false teeth.
As the team looked into Denzel Walker's past, their inquiries revealed that he had been a prolific sexual predator and had a history of violence, but never murder.
The fact that Julie was killed could suggest that he was escalating in his offending and he was fantasizing about killing as well as sexually offending.
I think his plan was sexual gratification. I don't think he thought beyond that. He clearly decided when he picked her up that he was going to assault her. There's no way she'd have formed a relationship with him.
He wasn't a looker. I think he perhaps came across as a friend, you know, the sort of person that women wouldn't find attractive but could probably get on with, you know, as a friend quite well. And he was offering something. He was offering a bit of adventure, a bit of glamour, you know. Who wouldn't want to go and work on a yacht in Europe in summer, you know, at that age? Who wouldn't?
It was sexual assault was his motive. What he was going to do with Julie after that is a moot point. We don't know whether he'd have strangled her and murdered her, but clearly he was prepared to do whatever he needed to do. And he'd hit upon this idea of using the drugs to make her compliant, so that she wouldn't be able to resist.
It was going racing ahead, and everybody was getting very excited. But there's so much then, once you've detected the crime, is then proving it.
The detectives investigating the murder of Julie Clayton had built a strong case against their prime suspect, Denzel Walker. Julie's family made the journey from Australia in the hope that her killer would be brought to justice.
It was clear they were a close family unit. They wanted to give Julie her freedom, but she was in regular contact with them. The last correspondence she had with them, her family, was a postcard she sent from Cornwall with a Plymouth postmark on the 30th of June, the day before she met Walker. And the message on that was, yeah, I'm about to set off. I won't be long. I'll keep you posted of my progress. There wasn't, as I recall, a detailed plan. It was just that she was setting off. She'd keep them posted along the way, and they were looking forward to seeing her. It was very sad, but I remember her brother I spoke to. They were quite dignified, they were respectful, they listened, and it must have been an awful moment for them. But they were able to come across to the UK and at least see where we'd found Julie and talk to us and get the questions answered to fill in the gaps to help them move forward.
DCI Nick Howard had promised Julie's family justice. Denzel Walker was in police custody and was struggling to undermine the evidence the police had against him.
So the facts of the case, Julie Clayton was murdered, that's a fact. That Denzel Walker was seen with her, that's a fact. His van that she got into was recognised as and traced to him, that's a fact. Her belongings were found, that's a fact. The injuries on her body is a fact. False teeth marks in her breast, a fact. The fact that they could all be traced to Denzel Walker, fact.
We know that Julie had been bitten on her breast, and in the investigation, the police managed to match the bite on her breast to Walker's dentures. This suggests that even though he's shown some elements of forensic awareness, he didn't think through that he could be leaving a trace of himself on her body. He didn't go to that level of planning, but also that was part of his sexual fantasy, and that therefore he wasn't thinking at that point. He just wanted to commit the act of biting the victim.
With Walker arguing against the evidence, Nick and the team needed to be able to place him at the scene of the crime.
The significant part was his alibi was undermined by the cell site analysis. It was early days, but the service provider said that it was conclusive, that that phone was certainly not there. And he did tell us it was with him. It was a prized possession, so he wasn't saying, I left it, here. He had a difficulty because the phone cell site put him in Lincolnshire, not Southampton, miles away. So he had a problem on that Sunday. The rest of it fell into place with the ID, the two witnesses, the gentleman at the bedsit, the lady who he tried to assault on the boat in France. They picked him out. And so by that time, it was all becoming pretty compelling.
After a 16-month-long investigation, Denzel Walker was facing trial for the murder of Julie Clayton.
So Walker, on the fourth day, was charged with the murder of Julie Ann Clayton between Friday the 1st of July 1994 and Wednesday the 6th of July 94, which was when she was found.
In November 1995, Denzel Walker finally went to court.
So I went to court, and to my surprise, and I think the newsroom too, his solicitor applied for reporting restrictions to be lifted. So when this happens, what that means is that you can report everything and anything that's said in front of the magistrates court. So all of the background that was given there by the prosecution, which would be as they saw it, the facts of the case, the fact that this girl was found dead in a ditch in Colby, the fact that Denzel Walker had picked her up in Cornwall, the fact that he was seen with her, the fact that his van had been identified, the van that picked her up had been identified, and all this kind of stuff, And his solicitor, I think, then stood to ask for reporting restrictions to be lifted because they wanted to appeal for more witnesses.
It was a 2-week trial, Nottingham Crown Court. It was a relatively short trial by standards. Every witness gave evidence, from the forensics, through the police, through the witnesses themselves. Walker gave evidence, so he went into the box. He could have chosen not to do that. Probably an illustration of his self-confidence. And his cross-examination was at length by the barrister, and he was unrepentant and pleading his innocence throughout and jousting his way through the questions.
Denzel Walker, all I can say is he's just stood there, I think, and listened, or sat when he was told to sat. He wasn't misbehaved. He didn't shout anything, say anything, as far as I recall. He just, when asked to give his name, he gave it, and when told to sit, he sat, and so on.
And he at no time admitted the murder of Julie Clayton. The closest he came was he said that she administered the drugs himself. She died unexpectedly, and he panicked, deposited a body. He realised he shouldn't have done that, but that was in court. That was at the 11th hour when he did that, when he saw that there was nowhere else to go.
Walker's defence is that Julie took the drugs herself, and then he panicked and dumped the body. Everything in this case says that is completely untrue. The fact that Walker killed Julie could suggest that he planned to do that all along, and it was no longer enough just to sexually assault. He wanted to kill. To give somebody that many drugs, surely he was aware that that could kill her.
At the trial, he was cold, aloof, very passive, calculating, thinking on his feet. Never showed any remorse, never showed any emotion, just staring ahead, and trying to manipulate, even then, right to the end.
By the end of the trial, the jury had seen through Walker's attempts to lie and cover his tracks.
The jury found him guilty They weren't convinced by his story that it was a terrible accident, that he'd panicked and deposited the body. They accepted the prosecution case that this was a dangerous sexual predator.
Delighted, really, and elated is the word I was looking for, that you've actually got the right person. I know it was the right person. We haven't got any doubt about that, Saul. The evidence was overwhelming. And you've done a service to the community, and you've probably saved somebody else from the trauma that he's going to commit in the future.
Walker's sentence was 20 years life imprisonment.
The judge stipulated that before he could be released, he had to be of an age or of a state where he wasn't going to be a danger to other women, because the judge clearly saw that he was a danger to other women, that he was devious and a sexual deviant, and that he wasn't going to stop. He may have gone for another and another, you know. So the judge was probably right in his assessment that he would not have stopped offending.
It's difficult to know what to say about Denzel Walker, really. He obviously was quite a violent man. He obviously had this propensity to pick up young ladies who didn't really find him attractive, but he found them attractive, obviously.
I would say from looking at this case that it is very apparent to me as a psychologist that this man was going to go on to commit murder at some point. His sexual offending would have escalated to the point that he would have killed at some point. And I think after Julie, the fact that he did kill, he would go on to kill again.
The most frightening thing about him was how impassive, unremorseful and calculating he was. From his forensic awareness through to his mental strength to stick to this story of you've got the wrong person, and then belatedly, it was a terrible accident.
Based on what I know about offenders and based on the behaviour of Walker in this case, I think he's probably got quite a high opinion of himself. I think he thinks he's a charming individual and people are there purely to serve his needs, which suggests he's quite a narcissistic, egocentric character.
Walker was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 20 years. Finally, Julie's family knew the truth.
We're very relieved it's all over and that it's settled the way it has. It's helped us through the stage of our grieving. She did a great deal of good. She helped a lot of people who you'd almost call the rejects of life.
By identifying Julie and identifying then the killer, it must have given some solace to the family and some closure at the end of the day. They knew what happened to the daughter, a tragic death to a daughter.
My lasting thoughts in this case are twofold, really. One, of great sadness for the family that they never got to be reunited with Julie. And secondly, satisfaction that we managed to get justice for them.
He died in prison. I mean, you know, what more can you say? I mean, here's the thing, isn't it? Is it about justice or is it about revenge? If you're talking revenge, maybe not, you know, because nobody fed him drugs and left him in the back of a van to die and then dumped him naked in a ditch for anybody to find. So if it's revenge, no. But if it's justice, what more can you do but lock a man up in prison and deny him his freedom for the rest of his life? And that's ultimately what happened with Denzel Walker. So in that sense, yes, I think you have to say justice was done.
You always have to give yourself just a minute, stand by and realise what tragedy has happened here. And there's an awful lot of people going to be affected. Not only that poor lady in the ditch, but all the family around her, her friends, the people she's met recently, and she's suddenly gone.